Hi everyone, this is Constellations here. So I finally have this Cyno Math Guide 1 ready. I'm gonna do it slightly differently this time around. I'm actually gonna exclude the solo damage figures because Sumeru characters, a lot of them are EM skilling, and there's aggravate and spread reactions, which really makes it such that looking at solo damage isn't really a good view anymore, even if it's just meant to give a rough idea. So I'm gonna skip that. So without further ado, let me go into Cyno's stats and weapon, signature weapon, and we'll talk about the rest of the usual stuff when we do Math Guide 1, which is going into his kit and his rotation in general and his energy as well. Alright, okay, so this is Cyno's stats. The base HP is actually pretty decent. Okay, not too bad. The base attack is nice. It's more than 300. For 5-star DPS, you should always have something like this. Although it's not like the highest because I think highest is about 343 or 342. And base defense is decent for melee DPS. But more importantly, he has crit damage ascension stat, and that's very good. Given that he needs more stats than other folks, and I'll talk about that later. So this is Staff of the Scarlet Sands. This is his signature weapon. It has a very high CR. But more importantly is the crazy weapon refinement effect that it has. So essentially, you gain 52% of your EM as a bonus attack. Okay, but when your elemental skill, just do this. When your elemental skill hits opponents, the Dream of the Scarlet Sands effect will be gained for 10 seconds, and equipment character will gain 28% of EM as bonus attack. So that doesn't sound too much, right? But it's stackable. There are 3 stats that you can get with this. So you are incentivized to use your elemental skill as much as possible, as fast as possible. You now see why 40F is good. Okay, but especially if you're using his signature weapon, and this is 52 and 28, this 28% obviously becomes triple. So it's a lot of his EM being added as a bonus attack. So if you are able to get something like 1000 EM or 700 plus EM, it's actually a huge boost to his attack, and it allows you to go EM sense completely. Okay, let me redo this. So R5 is the same thing but doubled, which means it's 104% plus 56% times 3. That's like that's like almost 300% of the EM. Or okay, to be exact, it's about 270, 274, 274% of the EM is added as a bonus attack. If you use something like Thundering Fury, you're gonna be dishing out E's like crazy in his queue. And I'll talk more about that in his kit. But just know that his weapon gives a huge ton of attack. A huge amount of attack. But in return, there is no damage bonus. Which means damage bonus buffs from teammates are going to be very important. Kill Kazuha, right? Especially since Kazuha's damage bonus effect works off field. It can be proc off field. But I'll talk more about that when we go into the future math guides and talk about the comms, etc. Alright. So let me jump straight down. I will talk about talents, passive, constellations, kit summary, notes and assumptions, ER requirements, or rather more of notes since we are not doing the solo damage figures. So ER, energy, Cyno's general rotation in general. Okay, so between Cyno and Cyno, I can't decide what is the correct pronunciation. I don't really trust the English one with what happened with Tighnari and Tighnari. But at least I know that the Chinese version is actually Cyno. The Chinese version reads as Cyno. So I'm going to try to read it as Cyno. So Cyno's rotation in general and TLDR and what's coming next. Alright. So first off, let's talk about the talents. Normal attack talent. No, although he's an NA DPS, his NAs are all coming from his Q talent during his Q, so this NA talent can be kept level 1. Don't level it, there's no need to. Next, elemental skill. This is called Secret Rite Cosmic Soulfarer. These are the damage figures. You'll notice that there's something called Mortuary Rite, and I'll talk about that later here. But essentially, Mortuary Rite does more. It has a higher multiplier than the normal skill, normal E skill. Not to mention a bigger AoE as well. And basically, Cyno's E is a simple jet forward, which always generates 3 particles. Okay, always generates 3 particles. Once you activate his Q, his E is changed into Mortuary Right, which is basically a jumping AoE storm. It's pretty fast, and the AoE is pretty decent as well. And on top of that, the moment you activate his Q, his E cooldown is also reduced. Because if you notice, the E cooldown is actually 7.5 seconds outside of his Q. Within his Q, it's on a 3-second cooldown. So it's very highly spammable. That's why his signature weapon is designed as such, right? Getting 3 stats from using 3 E's. Now, on top of that, during his Q, when you use his E, he will generate 1 particle with a 33% chance for a second particle. So it's like 1.33, which is awesome, especially if you consider a certain someone that doesn't even generate energy during his Q, yeah? So his E is very spammable during his Q. It's already on a 3-second cooldown. Imagine if you use 4TF. Which also means great energy regen for himself, and even more so with 4TF. Okay, so you can imagine if he's using 4TF, he's gonna be able to spam like about 8 to 9 E's during his Q uptime. So that's more energy generation, right? It's about 10 plus particles. That's pretty good. Now another feature of his E during his Q, the mortuary right, if you use that, it will extend his Q duration by 4 seconds too. Each time you use it, and it can be extended up to 2 times. So the max duration is 18 seconds. Okay, so it can be extended up to 2 times. It's looking really good on his E. The E synergy with his Q synergy. Now, let's talk about the Q, Elemental Burst, Sacred Right Wolf Swiftness. These are the multipliers. You'll see that M4 is a double hit. N1 and N2 are really fast. If you've seen the animation, you know N1 and N2 is really fast. There is no scenario where you should only use N1. You should always be using N1 and N2 together as a set. Okay, and you have the M5 figures. Now, theoretically, given how fast N1 and N2 are, it may be better not to do M5 and just quickly do N1 and N2. But his M5, unlike most other characters, his M5 actually has a huge AoE. Because he throws his spear down and the effect looks really big. Yeah. Maybe against a single target it's better to do M4 cancels, while against multiple targets it's better to do M5. But I don't talk about that because actual testing is needed for that. Alright? So actual testing will be required for that. Now, on top of using his Q, you also get EM bonus, 100 EM bonus the moment you activate his Q. So that helps with his entire kit. Basic duration is 10 seconds, max is 18 seconds. 20-second cooldown, 80 energy cost. So Cyno's Q is kinda like Razor combined with Raiden. You go into a stance mode, which is called Pet Swan Path Clearer. But instead of physical, he's full electro. Okay, that's number one. That's the difference with Razor. And Cyno does any damage or CAPA if you want to. I'll talk about that later in the passives. Unlike Raiden, who does Q damage during her Q and Ace. So the damage type is normal attack, just like Raiden. But Raiden's damage is burst damage. The normal attacks during her Q is burst damage. This is why she doesn't work with Beidou. But Cyno does. And I'm not saying that you use it with Beidou. I'm just using it as energy to explain how the damage is calculated. So there's an attack type and damage type, what type of attack is and what type of damage is. So in Cyno's case, it follows whatever type of attack they are doing. Alright. Now, like I said, Cyno gains 100 EM in this mode, and on top of that, he also gains immunity to electro charge damage and increased resistance to interruption. So it's very similar to Razor and even Raiden in that sense. But unfortunately, the resistance reduction is pretty weak. It looks like Ayato level. So you're still going to have to dodge a few attacks, especially the heavy ones. Now, coupled with his E, you can see how his playstyle works out, right? Press E, Q, spam A and E during Q. A simplified summary will be this, but I'll obviously talk more about this later. Okay, so these are the talents. Let's talk about the passives, because you need to talk about the passive in order for the kit to really shine, right? So This passive is very straightforward. Basically, you get 25% more rewards when dispatched on a Sumeru expedition. So think of it like Shenhe's. Okay. Now it's good to have since we don't have a Sumeru expedition character yet, but it's not that important. Right? It's good to have. It's not going to be a reason for you to pull for him, right? Let's talk about the most important passive, or the two most important passives here. Feather Fall Judgment, which is his A1 passive. Now, when Cyno is in the Pet Zone Path Clearer state activated by Sacred Right Wolf Sweetness, which is his Q. So basically, when you are in the Q stance mode, Cyno will enter the NCR stance at intervals. So there's something called NCR stance. If he activates Secret Right Classmate Soulfarer, which is E, while affected by this stance, he will activate the Judication effect. So basically, during your Q, at specific intervals, you enter something called a NCR stance. During the NCR stance, if you use your E, he will activate this Judication effect, which basically buffs the damage of his E, this specific E, by 35%. And it fires off 3 Darkstalker bolts that deal 50% of Cyno's attack as electro damage. Now, I know 50% attack is not that great, but there's something here that I'll talk about that really makes this pretty decent. Now, Darkstalker bolt damage is considered elemental skill damage, which is to be expected, right? But this is important because of his C6, for you to know how the damage is calculated, yeah? Now, this passive basically gives you more motivation to use his E. Essentially, NCR stance, the animation wise, it looks like Raiden's E but with an MTI. Yeah, Raiden's E. So based on frame by frame analysis, NCR stance actually triggers every 4.67 seconds. I know a lot of people are saying that it's 4 seconds, but if you look at the frame by frame analysis, you'll see that it's actually 4.67 seconds. Or if I want to give a bigger range, it will be 4.6 to 4.6. 4.6 to 4.7 seconds. Now, you need to bear in mind that his E during Q cooldown is 3 seconds. Because of this, and the fact that you use your E before the Q, if you see here, you can actually pull off an additional E before the first NCR with something like an N2 or N3E. And then do a N5E. And this second E here will be the one which has the NCR stance effect for the first rotation. Now, it might make sense for every rotation to repeat like this now. We can't know until we test it for sure. Or maybe if you want to make it simple, for the future NCR stance, just spam normal attacks, which is what I will do here. But yeah, there may be some merit in repeating this combo. If you can. Let me think about it. No, you can't, sorry. Only the first period you can do it. You can't do it for the rest of the intervals because its E is 3 seconds, it's not half of this. Okay? So only the very first you can do this. Only the very first instance you can do this. After subsequent intervals of NCR, you can't. So basically, when you start his rotation, you do E, Q, you do a N2E or N3E, depending on when the E is ready, the first E. This first E does not have MCR stance effect. And then you do M5E. By the time you do M5, the second E will be ready for your NCR stance. You trigger your NCR stance. And from there on, you spend your normal attack until the NCR triggers on screen. You see the big MTI, you use your E. And then you rinse and repeat until his Q ends. That's basically how it is. Alright? Now, this is without 4TF effect. With the 4TF effect of the cooldown skill cooldown reduction, he can actually afford to do M4E plus M4E for each NCR interval, regardless of whether first or second or third or fourth. Yeah, so it's about four NCR intervals within one max duration Q. So this is really nice for TF, right? You can afford to do M4E, M4E. And it makes it really easy to remember what to do. Although it's not difficult with the normal rotation as well. But I really like the 4TF because you get to do double E every NCR interval, unlike the normal rotation where you basically do 5 E's. 2 on the first and 3 on the rest. So it's like 5 E's during his max Q. Whereas for 4TF you can do 8 E's. So that's very nice. And you don't forget the Q before the 8E. Before the Q. Sorry, don't forget the E before the Q. In return for using 4TF, you actually sacrifice EM from 4GD, right? Because 4GD gives you a lot of EM. So that factors in the next passive as well as his signature weapon. I will do a comparison between the two to see with the added E's, right? Does it compensate for the loss in EM? Now, lastly, for the Starstalker boats, although the name is boat, it doesn't look like a boat. Instead, it's like a sword slash wave. If you have ever played any RPG before, or any action adventure game before, or fantasy action game before, you know what I'm talking about, right? When I talk about sword slash wave, it immediately comes to mind. But it's a vertical one, okay? It's a vertical one, not a horizontal one. And effectively, on this passive, because it fires off 3, it travels in like a 3-pronged fork shape in front of Cyno. I.e., it can hit more than one enemy per boat, and enemies right in front takes damage from all 3 as well. Okay? So it's not a boat like a single target kind of boat. It's actually a sword slash wave that does AoE. I thought this is important to mention, yeah? Because when you read boat, you think that it's something like Doris effect. The 3 homing bolts after her E, which obviously only hits a single target. Let's talk about the next passive, Authority over the 9 bows. Basically, Cyno's damage values will be increased based on his elemental mastery as follows. Pet Swarm Path Clearer's normal attack damage is increased by 125% of his EM. So basically, this gives his normal attack during his Q EM skilling. Flat one though, not a damage bonus, a flat EM skilling. So it works kind of like, it basically works like Shenhe's. Okay, Shenhe and Yunjin's. Now, does Stalker Boot damage from his Ascension talent Featherfall Judgment is increased by 250% of his EM. That's a lot. Especially if you get like, I don't know, 700 to 1000 EM. It's quite substantial. Okay? It's pretty decent. And this is on top of his 50% attack. And if you're using the signature weapon, you will have a lot of attack because I talk about it, right? You get it. It has a lot of attack. Okay. Now, it's a pretty long section, but let me just go through it. EM scaling again. Get used to it. Yeah, you're gonna see a lot of this for Sumeru characters. Both of these EM scaling are pretty decent and it rewards you using EM sense on top of his signature weapon. Now, it also gives you incentives to use his NA over CA because the CAs are not being buffed by the EAM. The NA is. Now, even though CA has no ICD and okay, it's not that it's a no ICD, it has a separate ICD. Okay, let me put it this way, make it more accurate. And this is a good thing because I don't like his CA. Why not CA? Because I know some folks think that you should use CA for the extra aggravate prop, right? So here's the thing. His CA looks cool. He has a separate ICD from NA, so you're always guaranteed a aggravate. But it takes too much time. Okay, it just takes up too much time. First, you need to charge up and then he does a dash attack forward. So there is a slight pause. About 0.5 seconds. Yeah. Which means, I have not done frame by frame analysis on how long it takes, but it's about 0.5 seconds. 0.3 to 0.5 seconds, I guess. Which means you need to dodge to cancel animation. That's number 1. You also need to reposition. Okay. So I did do frame by frame analysis on the entire duration. And it takes 2 to 3 seconds to go back to doing NA from charging up CA until recovering. It's about 2 to 3 seconds. It's actually closer to 3 seconds. Okay? And to me, that's way too detrimental for extra aggravate prop. I would rather do a few normal attacks during that 2 to 3 seconds with the A4 passive EM skilling. Not to mention the C1, C2, C6 all buffs the normal attack. Of course, this is relevant more to people who spam. But if your Cyno is even if your Cyno is C0, right? Doing a few NAs along with the A4 passive EM skilling, I'm pretty sure it will more than cover that extra aggravate prop. Along with the charge attack multiplier. Why? Because even if it's not a few NAs, right? Let's say we compare it to the slower NA, like the N3 and N5, because in theory your charge attack should be replacing a slow attack, not a fast attack. This is not worthwhile, right? So technically speaking, if you want to replace the N3 and N5, it will be N2C and N4C. And it's not looking good for the charge attack because his charge attack multipliers are actually lower than his M5 and M3. We just talked about charge attack, it should replace the slower attacks. But the charge attack multipliers are actually lower than his N3 and M5. Oh, and one more thing, if you have an attack speed boost like C1 or any other characters giving you attack speed boost, it will not just be N3 or M5. You're probably able to pull off another N1 or N2. Or in fact, both N1 and N2, because like I said, N1 and N2 is like a set. That's how fast it is. So this is just not looking over the charge attack. And if you consider the high attack from his signature weapon effect, aggravate diminishes in comparison, while the effect of difference in multipliers also greatens in comparison when you have a higher attack. So think of it this way, okay? Basically at R1 of his signature weapon, you are able to get almost 1000 attack just from the weapon effect. If it's R5, it's 2000. So if I just use R1 to compare, okay, 1000 is huge. It's like a F2P Bennett's buff. Think of it that way, okay? So yeah, well, I may be wrong. Maybe when he's released a proper combo with the charge attack may be found, but I'm not convinced right now, so I will not be using his charge attack for my math. Or maybe if the charge attack multipliers are buffed significantly, which I doubt so, since he's very clearly an NA DPS from his kit. So this, I don't know, I don't feel good about using a charge attack given all of these factors. If you factor all of this in, it's not good. Even if it is able to immediately help you prot a aggravate, regardless of your NA ICD, because of a separate ICD, but I think it's still better to do NAs. Yep. Alright, so Constellation. Let's talk about Constellations. C1, Ordnance Unceasing Vigil. After using Sacred Right Wolf Sweetness, which is his Q, Cyno's normal attack speed will be increased by 20% for 10 seconds. And if the Judication effect of the Ascension Talent Featherfall, this is the one where you do the NCR stance, is triggered when he are doing his E. Basically, you do an NCR E, put it that way. Okay, let me simplify. Do an NCR E, and the duration of this increase will be refreshed. And obviously, you need to unlock that passive talent. So I can tell you, since you are going to be using his E while you are doing his Q, you actually get, it's an effective 20% attack speed throughout his Q. It's just throughout, which given how fast his N1 and N2 is, I would estimate as 8 more hits. 4x N1, 4x N2. The fact that his N1 and N2 are really fast is really, really good. I mean, the N1 and N2 looks almost like other characters' normal attack where it does 2 hits. That's how fast it is. Okay? So for 4TF though, I'm not sure 20% attack speed is enough to squeeze an N5 in before each of the 2E, which makes it M5E plus M5E instead of M4E plus M4E. Because after all, his M5 is a slower attack. So I need to test this out. It may end up being in something like M4E plus M5 plus M1E. So instead of 2 M5, it's 1 M5 and an M1, or even N2, which does make it better in terms of speed, in terms of timing. Okay, so yeah, it needs to be tested out with attack speed buff, how it will play out. And I have not decided whether I will use M5E, M5E, or M5, M1. In fact, I think it should be M5, M1, and 2. And that will actually be better in terms of the damage as well. Yeah, it's actually better this way. Yeah. Alright. Anyway, I will definitely fine tune this when we do the team comp. Okay? I'll do a team comp, Aggra spec comp with 4TF first. I'll probably do M4, M5, N2E. M4E, M5, N2E for the 20% attack speed buff. Alright, next, C2. Ceremony Homecoming of Spirits. When Cyno's normal attack hit opponents, his normal attack crit rate and crit damage will be increased by 3% and 6% respectively for 4 seconds. As if he doesn't need more buffs to his normal attacks, right, during his Q. And it can basically be triggered every 0.1 second, so every normal attack will get it. Max 5 stats, each stat duration counted independently. So what does this mean? you get 15 CR and 30 CD at max stats, and you are able to get that very, very fast because of how fast normal attacks are. Basically, after the first round of normal attack string, you're basically getting the max stats, and you'll be able to maintain it as it goes. Because 4 seconds is more than enough time for you to use your E. That is 60 CV from a C2. Okay, let that sink in. It's 60 CV from a C2. The last time I saw 60 CV was, if I'm not wrong, Itto C6 with crit damage. Although his C6 has a huge other benefit other than the crit damage, but still, this is really good, stats wise. Now, how you translate in terms of math wise, that will come when we do the team comp math. Alright. Okay, C3 very, very straightforward, just increase the burst level, and given that his Q contributes more than his E, makes sense for this with C3. Now, C4. When Cyno is in the pet zone path clearer state triggered by Sacred Rite Wolf Swiftness, after he triggers Electro Charge, Overloaded, Quicken, Hyper Bloom, and Electro Sword or Electro Crystallization reaction, which is basically all the electro-related reactions, okay, other than Aggravate. But it doesn't matter because you, in an Aggra spread comp, in an Aggravate comp, you will definitely trigger Quicken along with your Aggravate anyway when you refresh. So he will restore 3 elemental energy for all nearby party members except himself. And this effect can occur 5 times within 1 use of Sacred Rite's Wolf Sweetness. Okay? 5 times. So what this means, I can tell you guys my mouth went wide open when I saw this constellation. Because it's basically a mini Raiden in a constellation without having to build ER. But then, I saw that it doesn't apply to himself. Whereas Raiden's does. Raiden's energy restoration applies to herself as well. But it doesn't for Cyno. I.e., this is a party member teammate buff only, not for himself. But it does help resolve the lesser energy from the lesser E's that your teammates will be casting. Because in a Cyno comp, you can't use. It's very, very difficult for you to utilize those low CD, low CD E's. Because you won't be able to swap him out. The moment you swap him out, his Q ends. So his on-field demand is extremely high for Cyno. So restoring 50 energy to the rest of the teammates who can't use their E's that much, like only once per rotation, I think it's still okay. This is pretty good. Yeah. There is, however, a think about it. If you use Cole, you might have an issue with this since Aggravate is not included, right? Maybe. But you'll still be able to get almost full. It should be at least 4 times. I need to do more analysis on this. But yeah. But still, 50 energy is pretty good. It's not groundbreaking. If this 50 energy restores for himself as well, this would be an OP C4 because his energy demand is very high as well. Okay, maybe not OP, but really good. Now, C5 increases his E, which unlike Tighnari's C5, right? This is actually pretty good, right? Because you see how much energy his E and Q have with each other. Especially if you're using 40F, then it makes more difference because you're spamming more E's. C6 Raimon just skills. After using Secret Rite Wolf Sweetness or triggering Judication, Cyno will gain 4 stats of the Day of the Jackal effect. When he hits opponents with normal attacks, he will consume 1 stack of the Day of the Jackal to trigger 1 Darkstalker Bolt. Remember, the Darkstalker Bolt is like a sword slash wave. So basically, every time you do your normal attack, you trigger 1 sword slash wave out. You now see why his normal attacks are really important in his kit. Of course, not everyone gets C6, I know, but yeah, let me just run through this. Day of the Jackal lasts for 8 seconds, max 8 stats. 1 stat can be consumed every 0.4 seconds. Effect will be cancelled once the Q stuns ends, and obviously you need to unlock the talent, Feather Fall Judgment. And since you need to unlock this talent, it means that it also gets the 250% EM buff. Okay, it's very, very straightforward. Now, this coupled with A4 giving the 250% EM bonus onto this boats makes this Constellation pretty damn good. And based on what's available now, it seems the max 8 stats only refers to concurrently, which means that if you don't use your normal attacks, you can only gain up to 8 stats max as you spend your E and right after you use your Q. But here's the thing. You're going to be using your normal attacks, so you can actually trigger more than 8 throughout his Q. Because I saw a C6 video, it shows clearly that he does more than 8 of these Darkstalker bolts just from his normal attacks, not including the E's. The 3 Darkstalker bolts from the E. So as long as you consume and refresh in time, which is easily doable because you're going to spend your NAs and your E, okay, you will trigger more than 8. Which means that all his NAs during Q are now boosted with a slash wave that is range, because it's a wave. It's a wave that travels out from you, a vertical wave. Okay, you can hit more than one enemy at a time. So basically, this is both fun and OP, right? Because it kind of gives him a mid range while being highly spammable and having AOE. Holy shit! Seriously. Okay, now let's talk about the Constellations conclusion. So all his Constellations look good. If I really have to choose a worst, it'd probably be C4 because of the fact that C4 doesn't restore energy for himself. But if you put energy hungry teammates in there, it's actually good too, right? It's not bad. It's not like Tighnari C5 where seeing it just makes hurts the hell out of me because it's absolutely useless. Okay? Increasing that E talent by 3, I'm sorry, but doesn't help much given that E is such a small percentage of his overall damage output. Now I have to do math to see if the constellations are really good, and I'll cover that in future math guides. Don't worry. Okay. Let's talk about kit summary. Alright, I talked so much about the talents, passive, constellations, whether even some of the rotation portion as well. So Razor was my first main. So I'm really looking forward to a stronger version of him, which is Cyno. I'm most likely going to C6 my Cyno, unless his constellation values are absolute trash. You know, because this time around it's not about value, it's about enjoying the character. Unless it's really, really bad. Then I can't bring myself to spend. His playing style is really fun, and animation looks really good too. Go check out the animation. It looks really nice. It's easily one of the best normal attack animation that you'll see in game right now. And damage wise, I'll do the math before I comment on it, but I can tell you if you consider the signature weapon is looking really good, it's hard to say, I have to do the math. In fact, I can tell you guys I'm very torn between 4GF and 4TF for him. So I will definitely do the math to compare both. But both of them looks good, right? Because 4GD gives you so much EM. 4TF on the other hand gives you what do you call that? A lot more ease, which synergizes a lot with his entire kit. And with the added energy, we may even be able to drop an electro battery. That's something that I'll explore. Okay. Now, in terms of the important notes and assumptions, I just want to share with the EM and reactions playing a bigger part in Sumeru meta, I will drop solo damage calculations because it's not that helpful of a view anymore. Okay. Cyno's ICD. Let's talk about his ICD. Okay. Actually, this is more like important notes right now because there's no assumptions because I'm not doing any math. Okay. At least not for the damage figures. So E has no ICD. So that's very important for 4TF, right? Because if you cut your 4TF, you want the E to not have any ICD. So when you spam them, you still get your aggravate every single time. Because if it has ICD, you won't be able to benefit from 4TF, allowing you to use two E's within one NCO interval. Okay, it's going to be one aggravate proc instead of two aggravate procs. So another reason why 4TF is good for Cyno. Now Q, for his NA and CA during his Q, there's a separate ICD, and both of them have standard ICD. What this means is that while you're doing your normal attacks, if you switch to doing a charge attack, it will always trigger an electro reaction. Which if you're doing an aggravate count, it will be aggravate. But I've already covered why I don't think it's worthwhile using the charge attack. So if you want to, check out the passive session on why not CA, if you really want more details on that. Now, A1 Darkstalker boats, it actually applies 1U every 2.5 seconds. Hits do not matter. So what this means is that if you're using 4TF, you're spamming your E, it will be faster than every 2.5 seconds. What this means is that your E will always proc aggravate, but the 3 Darkstalker bolts that is generated from your NCS stance. Oh wait, sorry. NCS stance, this A1 Darkstalker bolts only triggers when you have NCS stance anyway, which is always every 4.67 seconds. So this every 2.5 seconds, it basically means that every time the Darkstalker bolts are triggered, it will fire. It will have a Dendro it will have an electro application and trigger aggravate, or aggravate plus quicken, and I'll talk more about that later. Now the only thing is, we don't know whether they have a separate application per bolt. It should be, I think. I would think that it should be, but it's hard to say. Okay. Maybe I need to do a video analysis, a frame by frame analysis for this. And don't worry, I'll cover that when we do the damage comp, the aggravate comp. So C6 Starstalker boots have a separate ICD from A1. That's important. Okay, that's number one. It being separate is very important. It does 1U and it's on a standard ICD. Okay, it does 1U and it's on a standard ICD. So what this means is that your normal attacks, every 3 normal attacks, your C6 effect will again trigger aggravate or aggravate plus quicken. It's really, really good. Okay, now this is a good thing. Because I can tell you your 3 hits from this is going to be very fast, right? Because of how fast his N1 and 2 are. Now, quicken basically ranges from 8 to 9 seconds in general. 8 seconds if electro is applied to Dendro because of aura tests. I'm not going to explain aura tests. Go check out or Google aura tests if you want to. This is very, very technical. It's 9 seconds otherwise, assuming we are talking about a 1U application, whether it's the electro or Dendro. Okay, so that's why I say it's about 8 to 9 seconds. You can, for simplicity, you can just take it as 9 seconds if you want to. So Collei, what this means is that Collei works for Cyno's long Q duration as well, right? Because the last 8 to 9 seconds or 9 seconds, Collei's Q lasts 9 seconds, so 9 plus 9, 18 seconds. You have your full duration of Cyno's Q. So whether to use Collei or DMC, to me is a choice between allergy or Favonius. If you need more energy, Favonius. If you want better EM buff and you have allergy, then use allergy. Now, without allergy, DMC is better if you are doing Hyper Bloom too, because of the Hydro transfiguration on his Q. So because the Hydro Lotus has a bigger AoE. But that actually requires you to drop either the Electro Battery drop either Electro Battery or Animal Buffer. And I can tell you Kazuha's Destrucus is very good for him, and I'll talk more about this in the next math guide when I talk about Tinker options. So I don't want to drop Animal Buffer. But if you are doing Hyper Bloom, then you need to drop Electro Battery. So the energy math is very important. Okay, the energy requirements is very, very important. Okay, now the last point, quicken and aggravate / spread actually happens at the same time when quicken is being refreshed. I.e., the Tighnari, Collei, DMC, Yae figures that I did previously, right, are actually all better than previously assumed. Because previously I assumed that when quicken triggers, aggravate and spread doesn't trigger. That's not the case, because now we see that it does happen at the same time. Now after 3.0 is out, we see that it happens at the same time. So that's awesome. It just means that we do better figures, better than what I was previously calculated in my math guides. And moving forward for Cyno, obviously I will use the same point, which means that the aggravates will always trigger, basically, when you are refreshing. Okay, so these are the notes. I hope these notes are helpful to you guys. They should be, because these are important points to note in order to optimize Cyno. Now, energy-wise, basically Cyno's E gives you 3 particles outside of Q, 1 particle with a 33% chance for second particle within your Q. And this is something I actually covered earlier when I talked about the talent. I'll say it's pretty good for 80 energy burst character with high Q on field duration, especially since he can generate energy during his Q, right? Alright, this certain someone, yeah? Now, I'll go more into this when we go into rotation and explore more energy options. I'm personally keen on dropping Electro Battery for Zhongli, because Zhongli works great with Cyno. the number one, the E duration. Okay, 20 seconds. It's more than enough for your Cyno's Q duration, provided it doesn't break prematurely. That's number one. Number two, your resistance strat is awesome. That resistance strat is just so awesome, especially if you consider the fact that the 4-piece VV effect cannot be triggered off field, which means that it's not going to last throughout Cyno's EQ, but Zhongli Shield will. The resistance strat for Zhongli Shield will. Okay? But we need to make the energy work, and I will do some energy math for that. So Cyno's rotation in general, with 4 Thunder Fury, his typical rotation will be other characters doing their off-field sustain elemental application, buff setup, etc. And then when it comes to Cyno, you do a E followed by a Q, and then you do M4E, M4 NCL E. So when I say NCL E, what it means that you do the E when the NCL effect is there. Okay, very simple, right? Very straightforward. So basically M4E, M4CLE, M4 NCLE. This is a bit of a tongue twister. And you can repeat this 4 times because with an 18-second duration. Okay, with 4 GD or any other set really, other than 4 TF, the rotation will be after the other characters finish their setup, E, Q, NX until E, and then NX until NCLE 4 times. So what does this mean? NX means X number of normal attacks. It basically means that you do your normal attacks and you use your E the moment the E is ready, right after using your Q, before the first NC interval triggers, because it will match up nicely. You will be able to use your E again when the first NCLE triggers this year. Okay? Because of his E cooldown being shorter than his NCL, but it's unfortunately not half of the NCL, so you can't always do 2 E's. But at least for the very first interval, you can optimize and put in 1 more E. Okay? And NS until NCL is straightforward, right? Just use NA until NCL triggers to use E. Just spam your normal attacks until NCL triggers to use E. Now, it may be better to do M4 dash cancel is M5, but this needs to be tested. Okay? And also with C1 and attack speed boost, rotation will change slightly for 4 Thundering Fury. And I'll cover those in the future TF math guide. Maybe it'll be something like M5 plus N2E for the second round. Okay? I need to test it out to be sure. And also please refer to the why not CS session on why charge attacks are not included in the rotation. I know charge attacks have a separate ICD, can trigger aggravate immediately, blah blah blah. But there's a reason why I have not included it. Please look at that session. The session is in the passives, okay? In passive portion. Okay, so this is the Cyno's rotation in general. Now let's talk about TLDR. It will be a fast one because I know the videos are very long already. Cyno's kit is extremely fun to me as a previous Razor main, along with his cool animation and spamming of E during his Q. I'll comment on his damage in the next math guide, but it looks really good with his signature weapon. Without, I can't be sure until math is done. Because without his initial weapon, he does have a very low attack. So that can be rather detrimental. Okay? That may require you to use attack sense, and then you lose EM on all the EM skilling. So yeah. Not to mention your aggravates as well, right? So potentially without signature weapon, he may not be that great. But I don't want to comment until I've done the math. And more importantly, the fact that he can generate energy during his Q is really awesome. And I'll start with 4TF for my math first before exploring 4GD. For the longest time, I couldn't decide whether to do 4TF first or 4GD first. But I decided just to do 4TF because 4TF just looks so fun. Spamming the E double per NC interval just looks so fun to me. Okay? So Quicken, one I know there are more important notes than this, but I wanted to call out this important note again in the TLDR. Quicken ranges from 8 to 9 seconds. Okay? 8 seconds if Electro is applied to Dendro, due to the aura test, 9 seconds otherwise. So this is of course assuming 1U application. If you manage to do a 2U application, then it will last even longer. But here's the thing. Okay, if you do 2U, it's about adding 4 to 5 seconds. So it's about 12 to 14 seconds, thereabout. Now, Cole works for Cyno's long Q duration as well. Basically what this means is, right, because Quicken lasts 9 seconds, your Cole's Q also lasts 9 seconds. So added together 18 seconds, that's Cyno's max Q duration. So whether to use Cole or DMC to me is a choice between Allergy or Favonius, at least for aggravate comp. So without Allergy, DMC is actually better if you're doing Hyper Boom too, because you're going to do a Hydro Transfiguration on his skill, which means a bigger AoE. But putting that Hydro slot in requires you to either drop an Electro Battery or an Animal Buffer. And I can tell you Animal Buffer is really, really good for Cyno, especially if you have Freedom Zone. It buffs its normal attacks as well. And Sucrose gives you EM, and also the 20% damage bonus, right? So all of this, I'll talk more about it in the next math guide. Obviously, Sucrose won't be as great as Kazuha because Kazuha's damage bonus, basically you're able to use it. Yeah, you're basically guaranteed throughout, almost throughout his entire Q duration. It's about 16 seconds. Okay. So yep, I hope this video has been helpful to you guys. Me going through Cyno's entire kit, going to the mechanics in terms of ICT, the rotation, the NCS stance, etc. Now, coming up next will be 4TF aggro spread, 4GD aggro spread, and comparison versus 4TF. Weapon comparison, constellation refinement comparison, etc. So let me know if you want any other specific type of math, but I will have to at least focus on completing this, maybe at least these 2 or these 3 here first. Alright? Okay, thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you guys next video. If you like the content, review video and click subscribe for more. Bye.